Bitcoin is literally just a reflection of how many units of fiat are there out there in the world. It goes up the most in price. This year, I think we get to 250,000 in Bitcoin. Maybe this summer we run to something like 150 to 200,000 before we get some sort of like pullback. Trump and co are going to print more money than Biden did during COVID. And that's how we get to Bitcoin $1 million and S&P 10,000 and gold 15,000. But if you're like trying to hit 100x, you should have been in Solana. You should have been in Hyperliquid at $3 when it launched, right? You should have been in all these different things. But then you're going to have to trade on the risk curve and be looking at your phone 24/7 and all that kind of stuff.
历史上最年轻的非裔美国加密货币亿万富翁 Arthur Hayes 也是 BitMEX 交易所的共同创办人，预测比特币将飙涨到100万美元，会不会太夸张？为什么背后最大的推手就是美国总统川普？我们真的会迎来史上最大规模的印钞吗？股票、比特币、房地产会涨到多高？那我们现在该投资什么才能跟上趋势？这次 Arthur 还公开了自己的投资组合，为什么看好以太币，认为投资 Solana 是一种赌博行为？如果你正纠结要投资什么加密货币，那今天的影片一定要看到最后，因为你将听到亿万富翁给币圈新手最实用的投资建议。嗨，我是 Emma， 带你在币圈趋势中打造属于自己的被动收入。在我们开始前，可以请你帮个忙吗？YouTube 后台显示有 76% 的观众还没订阅频道。如果你喜欢我们的影片，免费支持我们的方式就是点下订阅按钮，每周日都能收到币圈最新的消息，更不会错过任何的财富密码哟。谢谢。
You recently tweeted, Chimerica, it's time to buy everything. That seems like a pretty good directive to the market. Why is it time to buy everything?
So, I mean, obviously we had, Liberation Day and a week of financial, essentially panic. And in the wake of that, not a capitulation, but a pivot from a maximalist tariff position. Trump said, okay, 90 days and everybody except China. Besson came on TV and said he's got treasury buybacks. I'm going to make sure that the market's well functioning. And that was the bottom of the market. And what's crypto? Bitcoin's up, what, like, I don't know, 35% since then. ETH's up 50%. Pick your, shitcoin, meme coin, all crushing it. NASDAQ up on the year, right? It was down 20% into early April. Now it's up 30% since the day. So this is the bottom is in. And now we get this, U.S. and China are walking away from trying to impose tariffs on each other. And so I think sort of the meta that America is going to make itself great again using the tool of tariffs, that's over. I think it's going to come down to capital controls, but that's a longer burn issue. But as it portends to risk market, just buy everything, right? The bond market threw a bit of a fit. They pivoted, and we know what happens. The money gets printed.
All right, so let's separate these two conversations. First, let's have the fun conversation, which is they're going to print money. Is this 2020, 2021 run back turbo? And literally, we are just going to go into this massive economic boom. Asset prices go to the sky. And anyone, as long as they just close their eyes and throw a dart, should be able to make money?
I don't think if you close your eyes and throw a dart, you should be able to make money. I think, yes, they're going to print a lot of money. Because this is a global monetary transition, it's going to dwarf what we've seen so far, especially in the COVID era, which was a nutso period for financial markets. Trump and co are going to print more money than Biden did during COVID. That's going to happen. That's
you think
my prediction. And that's how we get to Bitcoin $1 million and S&P 10,000 and gold 15,000 and all these crazy price targets that you wouldn't otherwise expect.
Why do you think that they're going to print more money? Like, what's going to drive that? Is that just pure stimulation of the asset price and that's what they're going to be focused on? Or is there going to be some other reason that they have for the printing of money?
So I go back to the way I characterize sort of Trump 2.0, and this is a bipartisan thing in the United States, is that they want to rectify these global imbalances that have built up since 1971, which is the U.S. runs, or more likely since 2002 when China was entering the WTO. They want to reduce the trade deficit, which has a mirror effect of reducing the capital account surplus. It's just math, right? If I earn dollars by exporting things, I take those dollars and I buy treasuries, stocks, and property. If I no longer have dollars, then I'm no longer buying treasuries, stocks, and property. And so if you look at the marginal driver of U.S. exceptionalism in the stock, bond, and property market since the early 2000s, it is foreign capital buying stuff. And so tariffs are not politically palatable situation to rectify this. People don't want to have, their toy doll costs double, or when they go to the store, there's nothing there because it's all produced in China, and now China with 100% tariff isn't going to send anything else to the U.S. That is not politically palatable. People are not going to vote Republican in 2026. And I think that message got through to Trump through various cabinet members, through Republican folks who need to get reelected in a year and a half. Like, this isn't going to work. I'm going to lose if you keep up with this tariff thing. And so we saw a pivot. Now, I don't think Trump has sort of abandoned this idea that the demise of American manufacturing, military strength, substance abuse, all that sort of stuff, driven by the financialization of America post-gold standard. I don't think that he's stopped having that as a campaign promise to fix that. It's just that they're going to go about it in a different way. And so you can attack this deficit at the deficit level, tariffs, trade, or you can attack it at the surplus level on capital controls. And so I believe capital controls are coming to the United States in the form of some sort of mild taxation of foreign stock, bond, and property holding. And using that money, well, because foreigners will leave because they have to pay a tax, or at least some of them, then they have to print money to make up the difference because they're not going to allow the stock and the bond market to fall.
All right. So let's talk about the capital controls. What you're basically saying is they want capital domestically inside the United States. Americans obviously have money here in America. They buy American products, they buy American stocks, they buy American real estate, they buy, whatever asset. But also foreigners, you're claiming, have been a huge driver of those domestic assets as well, real estate, stocks, etc. If all of a sudden Trump starts to do certain things that disincentivizes that foreign investment, then there could be a potential lack of buying power, which could lead to a lower price, which obviously he doesn't want. And so you're saying that there will be capital controls on the foreigners or capital controls on U.S. citizens, or both?
On foreigners.
On foreigners. Okay. So if a foreigner has S&P right now, and they want to sell and take their cash back to China or Finland or India or wherever, you think that they will put up some sort of barrier to allow them to do that?
Yeah, there's some sort of tax. Or you could do a foreigner wealth tax, right? Every year you pay us 2% of the value of whatever your American stock, bond, and property is, right? In cash as a tax, right? And so either you say you stay or you leave. You choose one. We don't care, because either way, either I get the tax revenue and I reduce taxes on Americans or give some sort of government handout, or the capital leaves and the other currency on the other side appreciates, and I rectify my manufacturing deficit. So choose one. But it takes a bit longer. It's a little bit less direct, but you don't get the empty shelves. You don't get the goods inflation immediately, which loses you an election in 18 months.
How do you think Bitcoin plays into all of this? And I use Bitcoin as maybe a barometer for so much of global asset flows, liquidity, sentiment. It's just kind of like it is the macro asset now. So how does this play into the chaos in chief? Like, that's part of the strategy, is just create mass chaos all the time. But also it seems like, you have Besant, who is much more measured and like talking to the market, simultaneous to Trump, who's maybe talking at the negotiating table.
I mean, Bitcoin is just a reflection of global liquidity flows, and at the margin, that's the U.S., right? So what do we know is true about financial policy in the U.S.? Doesn't matter what party is in power, is if the bond market volatility gets to a level, and that level has been empirically seen to be 135 to 140 on the MOVE index, the policy response is immediate, like the same day. What do we have? In April 9th, MOVE was like, I think opened at 130 or 128, whatever it was, got to 172 intraday.
这里我补充一下，MOVE指数是用来看美国国债的波动，就像 VIX 恐慌指数是看美国股票的波动一样。但不同的地方是，当MOVE指数飙高，代表大家预期美国国债的价格会剧烈波动，买也怕，卖也怕，将会严重影响全球对美国的信心，担心美债会不会倒，美元会不会崩盘，所以政府才会立刻出手干预，降低MOVE指数。像是之前川普一副肯定要课关税的样子，结果到了真正要课税的日子，MOVE指数飙高。4月9日，川普立刻妥协，表示 暂停关税。
Jamie Dimon goes on CNBC saying tariffs are dumb in his Jamie Dimon way, and Trump walks back.
Which is not to say tariffs are dumb. He just says every other word except for that. Yeah. Politically correct. He says tariffs are dumb.
And there's a 90-day pause, and everybody except China. Besson gets on television a few days later on Bloomberg and says, "I've got treasury buybacks. I can, don't fuck with me. I've got treasury buybacks. Treasury market's sweet. Right?
My guns are loaded."
Yeah, bottom market bottoms, and then we rip, right? So, and what happened in September of 2022? Bond market is getting crushed. S&P down 20%. Move is at like 140. Yellen or somebody in her staff says, "Okay, there's $2.5 trillion sitting at the Fed reverse repo. Let's change how we issue our bonds so that we draw that money out." And so she did more bills issuance than bonds issuance, and that sucked $2.5 trillion over 2 years out of the reverse repo at the Fed into the global financial markets, and everything ripped. Stocks, bonds, crypto, gold ripped, right? And so that is the number that we should be focusing on. That is, volatility cannot be in the financial markets when you have so much leverage and everybody's running some sort of carry trade. And so that's why the authorities always step in when the volatility increases in the bond market. And because Bitcoin is literally just a reflection of how many units of fiat are there out there in the world, it goes up the most in price. And that's it. It's just that simple.
So Bitcoin went from 109 for a couple seconds, all the way down to 74, 75,000. It's ripped back to over 100. Where do we go during this cycle? Do you think we go to 1 million? Do we think you go to 200K? What's kind of your thought process, given that you think there's a lot of money printing on the horizon?
So I think Trump team is very serious about trying to do their part in rectifying these imbalances. I think capital controls are the way they're going to do it, which is a little bit slower burn. But foreigners are going to react by selling assets because now there's a tax and they don't want to pay it. And so that's going to require printed money to replace those dollars. So if the foreigners aren't going to supply the dollars to levitate treasury market and the stock market and the property market, the U.S. government will supply it via the Fed, the Treasury, and sort of legislative actions that they can do, like Fannie and Freddie being out of conservatorship or stuff like that, right? So that's all coming, and that money gets printed, and Bitcoin benefits the most out of all the different risky assets that one could own out there. And that's how we get to $1 million Bitcoin. I think that happens sometime between now and when Trump exits office in 2028. So that's sort of my goal. North Star, this year I think we get to 250,000 in Bitcoin. Maybe this summer we run to something like 150 to 200,000 before we get some sort of like pullback, right? They set these 90-day targets. Obviously now you have a strike price, a maturity, an expiry. There's going to be insane volatility around that. Will they or won't they? What's the deal going to look like? And obviously Trump's going to posture that he's serious about really inflicting some pain on trade partners. So you could see sort of, ditch the bride at the altar negotiating style where, oh yeah, I was going to do a deal, but fuck you. I'm going back to maximalist tariffs, really get whatever he thinks he needs to get out of that negotiation. And we could see some insane volatility around, was it July 4th for everyone except China? And then China's like August 10th, something around there. Mm-hmm. So I think now we have those dates in mind. I wouldn't really want to be long. I wouldn't want to be overly long any risky asset, especially around the Chinese X date, because we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we know eventually they're going to print money and all that kind of stuff. But in the moment, if you're leveraged and you're out over your skis, that can be pretty painful for you.
或许有人会认为印钞跟我有什么关系？只要我有一份工作，按时领薪水就好啦。其实印钞对每个人都有影响，因为当印钞的速度太快，就会导致资产暴涨。有买资产的人什么都没做就赚钱，没有资产的人什么都没做就被抢劫。像是2020年新冠疫情期间，美国在短短2年内印了超过4兆美元，台湾房价也跟着上涨超过 50%。这是2020年全台房价至今的变化，从 97.85 上涨到 150.38， 上涨超过 50%。但是我们的薪水有上涨 50% 吗？又像是2020年比特币才7000元，至今暴涨超过10万元，上涨10倍以上。但是我们的薪水有翻倍吗？所以现在你还觉得印钞跟我们没关系吗？虽然我们无法影响政策，但可以先做准备。只是新手该怎么投资币圈才安全？这么多诈骗该怎么辨识？所以今天我想把最新写的这本书 自由，免费的送给你。我浓缩自己投资币圈4年来暴富到8位数，又赔了90%，直到现在稳定获利的投资秘密。新手该如何投资币圈赚钱？分享安全又快速的3大步骤，并且准备常见的50个币圈专有名词，帮助你轻松理解市场，从此远离诈骗。你可以在资讯栏的第1条连结中免费领取自由。这不仅是一本投资币圈指南，而是我如何从每天工作12小时的上班族，透过币圈成功开除老板，每天睡到自然醒的翻身经历。如果今天你错过领取自由的机会，那明天势必要用时间、金钱和精力去换取这些经验，这样不是很累吗？而且只要按照书中的步骤投资，不仅达成分散风险，更能在30天帮自己增加一份投资收入。来自台湾、杜拜、香港等超过60位上班族们都已经达成了。下一位远离危机、安全投资的人会是你吗
So Maelstrom, probably about 60% Bitcoin, 20% ETH, I'd say, and then the rest are, we do some liquid trading, so kind of EtherFi type stuff, and then we have a lot of allocations on term sheets, right? So, we were just receiving tokens periodically from either investments or advisory deals that we've done, and that's the last part of our portfolio. But the majority is Bitcoin. The goal is trade shitcoins and make Bitcoin, right? So at the end of the day, I take the profits, pay all the bonuses, and I buy more Bitcoin, and that's the goal of the fund.
ETH is 20%, not Solana. I think that maybe you should have been in Solana for the last year or so, but maybe you think that something different is going to happen in the future. How do you look at Ethereum versus Solana today, and then also where they're both going?
Yeah, of course, everyone wants to be like, shoulda, woulda, coulda, $7 Solana. You wish you would have sold everything and bought Solana, right? But again, whenever you think about it like that, I'm not that kind of investor. I'm not trying to hit 100x trade. If I had a 2x trade, or if I make 10% on the stash in my funds, pays for my lifestyle. I'm about capital preservation rather than capital appreciation, because I have enough capital already.
Yeah, we get it. Yeah, you're rich.
Yeah. So but if you're trying to hit 100x, fucking homers every day, then yeah, you should have been in Solana. You should have been in Hyperliquid at $3 when it launched, right? You should have been in all these different things, but then you're going to have to trade on the risk curve and be looking at your phone 24/7 and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I made a good trade on ETH. I've been long ETH for many years. I still think that ETH is going to have its run. Will it have performed better than if I had bought Solana at $7? Probably not. But that's just a trade I never would have done.
投资没有对错，只有个人选择。关键是我们有找到适合自己的投资方式吗？难道投资币圈想赚钱，一定要承受暴涨暴跌吗？有没有什么低风险的投资机会呢？当然有。透过放贷，将资金借给交易员，每天就能赚到稳定的利息，报酬率高于美国标普500和台湾房地产，但风险远低于直接投资比特币交易合约。再也不用担心晚上睡觉时手机通知币价暴跌亏钱，而是每天早上起床时账户就自动多了一笔收入。像最近关税大战，我收到来自台湾的学员分享，我觉得好险我有做一些放贷，不然我这一波就完蛋了。还收到来自香港的学员分享，放贷1年多了，最近放出的利息是我有史以来最高的，忍不住要留影纪念。所以如果你不想被政府抢劫，但也不愿意资产承受暴涨暴跌，那说不定放贷会很适合你哦。去年我还受邀到香港分享币圈投资经历，希望能避免新手再犯下我过去的错误，不用走弯路就能在币圈投资赚钱，过上每天睡到自然醒的生活。所以我准备了一个免费教学影片，分享自己是如何从什么都不懂的币圈韭菜，到现在成功打造一份稳定安心的被动收入。你可以在资讯栏的第2条连结中找到。按照影片步骤，只要30天就能达成分散风险，在币圈安心赚钱。相信明年的你会非常感谢现在的自己。2025年，你认为比特币会上涨到 A 15万，B 25万，为什么？欢迎留言分享你的看法。我是 Emma， 还会继续分享关于币圈投资、被动收入的经验。记得按赞、订阅、开启旁边的小铃铛，并打开全部，还有 follow 我的 IG 哦，那你就不会错过这些知识了。我们下周见，拜拜。